June 4th, 1989, night. Along a stretch of the Trans-Siberian Railway, something that looks like fog begins to creep through the lowlands. A pale cloud spreads across the ground, seeping into every crack, wrapping itself around the trees. But this isn't fog, it's gas, and it's deadly. At 1:15 in the morning, the earth shudders. A massive explosion tears apart the silence of the Siberian taiga. A fireball shoots a kilometer into the sky. The shockwave shatters windows 30 kilometers away. People rush outside in terror, convinced that war has begun. But this isn't a bomb, it's a train. In a single second, 2 passenger trains are reduced to twisted metal. 700 cars consumed by an inferno. Between 573 and 780 people are killed. It becomes the deadliest railway disaster in history. Picture the scene. A quiet night in the middle of the taiga. Children asleep beside their parents. Passengers dozing to the rhythm of the wheels. And in the blink of an eye, their world turns into a firestorm. What could cause such devastation? How does an ordinary journey turn into a nightmare? And the most important question, could it have been prevented? To understand that night, we have to go back 8 years. 1981. In government offices, a decision is made. Build a new pipeline, Western Siberia, Urals, Volga. An ambitious project stretching thousands of kilometers. Originally, it was designed for oil. Logical, Siberia is full of black gold. But someone higher up changes the plan. Gas will flow instead. It's simpler, faster, cheaper. Why build a new route when you can rework what already exists? And here's where the real danger begins. A section of the pipeline is routed directly alongside the Trans-Siberian Railway, just a few dozen meters from the tracks, passing by villages, towns, stations. On paper, it looks harmless. 2 neat parallel lines across the map. The railway and the pipeline, side by side, cutting through the taiga. Efficient, economical, rational. But no one stops to ask, what happens if that gas ever escapes? No one calculates the risks. No one imagines that this proximity could cost hundreds of lives. How could it happen in the Soviet Union? A country where every bolt was counted and every detail controlled. The answer lies in haste and cost-cutting. A new route meant extra surveys, approvals, and expenses. The corridor along the Trans-Siberian was already cleared, studied, ready to use. Why reinvent the wheel when you can follow a path that's already there? Pipes, each 1,620 millimeters in diameter, begin to snake across the Siberian land. They're designed to carry gas under immense pressure, dozens of atmospheres, a powerful stream that, in case of failure, could wipe out everything in its path. But engineers are confident. The system is reliable. Pipes pass inspections, welds are checked, pressure is monitored. What could possibly go wrong? Construction pushes forward. Kilometer after kilometer, the steel artery cuts through the taiga, across swamps, rivers, solid ground, each stretch with its own challenges. And then, in the spring of 1989, the pipeline goes live. Gas under enormous pressure rushes through the new route. Everything seems routine, no accidents. The system runs like clockwork, but beneath the Siberian soil, a time bomb is already ticking. And there isn't much time left before it goes off. June 3rd, 1989. A normal summer day in Bashkiria. Nothing hints at disaster. A few meters underground runs that steel artery, the same pipeline launched just months earlier. And then, a crack. Tiny, invisible to the eye. The metal gives way. Maybe a faulty weld. Maybe the ground shifted after the spring floods. The exact cause will never be known, but the result is the same. Gas begins to leak. At first, a thin whisper, then stronger, until 2,000 tons of liquefied gas, under crushing pressure, escape into the open. Imagine it, 2,000 tons. The energy of an atomic bomb, only drawn out over time. Gas has a treacherous nature. It's heavier than air. Instead of rising, it crawls along the ground like an invisible river. It pools in lowlands, fills ravines, spreads slowly across the valley. And this valley runs directly parallel to the railway tracks. Local residents notice a strange smell, sharp, chemical, unfamiliar. Some open their windows wider. Maybe something's burning nearby. Others call their neighbors, worried, but no one realizes they're breathing in a lethal cloud. Meanwhile, The gas cloud keeps growing, invisible but deadly. Any spark, any open flame, and the result will be an explosion of unimaginable force. And then nature adds the final, fatal ingredient. That night, there is no wind. Absolute stillness. The gas doesn't disperse, doesn't drift away. It settles like a heavy blanket over the railway, as if someone had deliberately laid a deadly trap. Everything is in place for disaster. All that's missing is a spark. At the same time, two passenger trains rush toward each other on the tracks. Train number 211, Novosibirsk-Adler, carries vacationers heading for the sea. Train number 212, Adler-Novosibirsk, brings sunburned tourists back home. On board are hundreds of people, families with children, elderly couples, students, business travelers. They should have passed each other safely at the 1,010th kilometer of the Trans-Siberian Railway the evening before, on schedule, by the book, as always. But the railway has its own rules, and delays are part of daily life. Train 211 is running 2 hours and 18 minutes late, held up by a technical problem along the route. Train 212 is also behind schedule, forced to wait at stations near Chelyabinsk. On the surface, nothing unusual. Delays are routine on the railway. Passengers grumble, conductors apologize, everyone is used to it. But this delay is fatal. If either train had been exactly on time, the tragedy would never have happened. They would have crossed paths far away, clear of the gas cloud. Hundreds of lives would have been spared. Instead, fate dictates otherwise. The two trains meet precisely where the air is saturated with explosive gas, at the very center of the invisible bomb. The first to sense something is wrong is Viktor Bezverky, the engineer of Train 212. A veteran of the rails, he notices the slightest change in his environment. Ahead, he sees what looks like a strange fog, but it doesn't move like natural mist. Something about it is different. Viktor takes a breath and winces. The smell is sharp, chemical, gas. He pulls the cab window wide open and inhales deeply. Yes, definitely gas. But how could it be here, in the middle of the taiga? He reaches for the brake lever. The train must stop, the situation assessed, the dispatcher alerted. But it's already too late. Ahead, the lights of the oncoming train appear. They're charging straight toward each other at full speed. Viktor Bezverky has no time to act. At 1:15 a.m., steel meets fire. The explosion is instantaneous. The gas-air mixture ignites from the smallest spark, maybe from a contact wire, maybe from the brakes. A fireball shoots a kilometer into the sky. At the epicenter, the temperature surges to 1,200 degrees Celsius. Can you picture that heat? Copper melts at 1,083 degrees, iron at 1,538. And here, 1,200 degrees engulf living people trapped inside train cars. The blast rips metal roofs off and hurls them hundreds of meters away. Cars crumple like matchboxes. Wheels fly off into the darkness. Rails twist into grotesque spirals. Flames consume 250 hectares of taiga in an instant. The entire valley becomes a colossal torch. Fire climbs higher than the tallest trees. The heat can be felt kilometers away. Those in the front cars, closest to the epicenter, die instantly. The others are thrown into a nightmare. Some manage to escape their burning compartments. Others are trapped inside the inferno. The first seconds after the blast are pure chaos. People crawl out of mangled cars through shattered windows, through torn metal walls. Many have burned hands, scorched faces. Clothes smolder on their bodies. All around, screams, cries, the crackle of burning steel. Flames rise above the treetops, painting the night sky crimson. Children search for parents. Parents call out for their children. Some try to help the wounded, others just run, desperate to escape the fire. Eldar Fazaliev, the conductor of Train 212, becomes a true hero that night. He doesn't think about his own safety. He throws himself toward the burning cars, pulling people out through windows, through any opening in the twisted metal. His hands are badly burned, but he doesn't stop. One passenger, then another, then another. Every life saved costs him superhuman effort. Eldar keeps going until his strength is completely gone. Among the passengers is Nadezhda Yushchenko, traveling on vacation with her mother. Their tickets weren't together. They're in different compartments. When the explosion happens, Nadezhda miraculously survives. Her car is less damaged by the fire. She makes it outside and runs to find her mother. She finds her in the next car. It's burning like a torch. Her mother is still alive, but there's no way to help. All Nadezhda can do is hold her hand and watch as the closest person in her life slips away. In minutes, a festive train full of holiday travelers turns into a place of shared tragedy. This is no longer a railway accident. It's a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. Meanwhile, in nearby villages, people wake to a roar unlike anything they've ever heard. The ground trembles beneath their feet. Windows rattle and crack. Above the taiga, the sky glows bright orange, as if a second sun is rising. Fidel Slutan Muratov runs into his yard wearing only underwear. What he sees is an enormous wall of fire, hundreds of meters high, rising straight from the ground less than a kilometer away. The heat scorches his face even at that distance. People grab children, documents, whatever they can. Some flee from the flames, others stand frozen, unable to believe what they're seeing. And some, like Fidel, run toward the disaster. Muratov has relatives on the railway, engineers, conductors, dispatchers. He knows the explosion happened exactly where the tracks run, which means his people could be in danger. He jumps on his bicycle and speeds through the forest. With every meter, the heat intensifies. Smoke stings his eyes and burns his lungs. But he doesn't stop. When he finally reaches the scene of the catastrophe, he sees an image that will stay with him forever. In the first minutes, no one understands what has happened. A gas explosion, a terrorist attack, a meteor strike, or the end of the world itself. The theories sound wild, but people simply cannot believe that an ordinary train could unleash such destruction. At 1:18 a.m., just 3 minutes after the blast, the dispatch center in Ufa receives the alarm. But what message can they send to headquarters? Words fail. A train exploded sounds absurd. How could a train explode with the force of an atomic bomb? The first fire brigades head out blindly. They have no idea what awaits them. A small fire in a carriage? A derailment? No one suspects the scale of the catastrophe. When they arrive, they freeze in disbelief. Their equipment is built to fight house fires, warehouses, forest blazes. But here, an entire valley is burning. The heat is so extreme, they can't even approach the epicenter. Military units are placed on high alert, but even they don't know how to respond. Engines overheat and stall. Fire hoses melt in the heat. Foam evaporates before it can reach the flames. Meanwhile, people are rescuing the injured with their bare hands. Locals, railway workers, anyone nearby. They don't wait for emergency services. They act out of conscience, out of instinct. Many burn their own hands and faces crawling toward the wreckage. They grab survivors by the arms, by their clothes, dragging them away from the flames to what they think is safety. But there is no safe distance. The heat can be felt half a kilometer away. Smoke spreads across the valley. And the worst part, no one knows when or if the fire will finally die down. People die right there, along the railway embankments. Pulled out of the inferno, but beyond saving. Their burns too severe. Ambulances are still on their way. At the same time, Sergei Stolyarov's freight locomotive is passing a few kilometers from the blast. The explosion wave nearly throws his train off the tracks. Stolyarov stops his locomotive and calls the dispatch center. What's happening? The dispatcher doesn't really know. Contact with trains 211 and 212 has been lost. Something terrible has happened on that stretch of track. Sergei makes a decision that will save dozens of lives. He turns his locomotive around and drives straight toward the fire. Not away from danger, but directly into its heart. His first run into the epicenter is a shock. Imagine it. A veteran railwayman, a man who's seen everything, left speechless. Where there should be carriages, only heaps of mangled metal. Where there should be rails, nothing but ribbons of molten steel. But Stolyarov doesn't freeze. He begins gathering survivors. Those who can walk climb into the cab. Those who can't are carried in. His locomotive becomes an improvised ambulance. He makes 3 runs that night. 3 times he returns to the inferno, risking his own life. And each time, he carries groups of survivors to safety, where doctors are waiting. But the worst part isn't the burns or the pain. The worst part is what the children say. They don't cry, they don't scream. They just state the truth. Mom isn't getting up. Dad isn't coming with us. Those words haunt Stolyarov for the rest of his life. In his dreams, he sees burning trains, the faces of those he couldn't save, the screams of people trapped in the fire, the children who lost their parents in a single second. The medical service in Ufa mobilizes instantly. Every available ambulance is sent to the disaster site. Doctors, paramedics, nurses, no one stands aside. But when the first units arrive, they realize they are unprepared for this. The burn injuries are beyond anything they've seen, even in textbooks. And here, there are hundreds of victims at once. Airlift operations begin. Helicopters ferry the wounded between the site and hospitals in Ufa. Transport planes carry the most severe cases to major medical centers in Moscow and Leningrad. Doctors work without sleep, without rest. Operating rooms stay lit around the clock. Surgeons, anesthesiologists, therapists, every resource is thrown into saving lives. But the numbers are merciless. Officially, 258 bodies are recovered at the site. And those are only the ones that could be identified. Many simply vanished in the firestorm. Nothing remained. 806 people are taken to hospitals with injuries of every kind. But for many, help comes too late. Burns cover more than 80% of their bodies. Medicine in 1989 is powerless against such wounds. In the days, weeks, and months that follow, people continue to die. Some can't survive the pain. Others succumb to infections. Some simply lose the will to live. The exact death toll has never been established. Estimates range from 573 to 780 lives lost. The gap is enormous, but understandable. In the chaos of those days, documents were lost, records confused. Families didn't always know which train their loved ones were on. And so, the statistics blur into something far greater, a human tragedy on an unimaginable scale. The entire region falls into shock. No one can believe what has happened. Disasters like this aren't supposed to happen in peacetime, but amid the grief, people reveal the best of themselves. Crowds of volunteers line up outside Ufa's hospitals. They bring food, water, blankets, anything that might help survivors and their families. Some arrive with truckloads of medicine. Others simply stand beneath the windows of intensive care, whispering prayers. News of the catastrophe spreads to Moscow and beyond the borders of the Soviet Union. The best burn specialists in the USSR are flown in. Renowned Moscow professors drop everything and rush to Ufa. International experts arrive too. After reviewing the evidence, British specialists declare it the deadliest railway disaster in Europe, and they are not exaggerating. By death toll alone, the Asha catastrophe surpasses every known rail accident on the continent. But the most harrowing work begins only after the flames are extinguished. The bodies must be identified. They are brought to the morgue in Ufa. Relatives are admitted one by one. They are shown photographs, burned clothing, personal belongings, rings, watches, pendants. The few things that survived the fire. Many bodies are burned beyond recognition. At 200 degrees, there is no chance. Families are shown only what's left. Shreds of fabric, melted metal objects, sometimes nothing more than ashes in a jar. Body parts are found even in the forest, hundreds of meters from the railway line. The blast wave scattered everything across a vast area. Search teams comb every square meter, but some victims are never found. For many families, the process of identification becomes another form of torture. How do you recognize your child from a charred school medallion? How do you identify a husband from a melted belt buckle? Some relatives never receive a clear answer. For years they wait, they hope that their loved ones somehow survived, lying unconscious in some distant hospital. But the miracle never comes. On train 211 were the students of Chelyabinsk School, number 107. They were on their way to a summer pioneer camp, a routine school trip, the kind that happens every summer. Children buzzing with excitement for vacation, counselors checking the lists, parents waving from the platform. Only one from the entire group survived, Alexander Saikev. Imagine that. An entire class wiped out in a single second. Friends he used to play football with, the girls he had crushes on, the teachers who were taking them on holiday. Alexander suffers severe burns, but he lives. Months in the hospital, dozens of surgeries, years of rehabilitation. The physical wounds eventually heal. The emotional ones never do. He becomes an athlete, runs marathons, competes in races, wins medals. Each victory he dedicates to his classmates who never came home, as if he's trying to live a life big enough for all of them. Around his neck, Alexander wears a medallion filled with photographs of his lost friends. 23 children's faces, 23 lives cut short in one heartbeat. He remembers every name, every story, every dream. Psychologists call it survivor's guilt, the torment of living when others did not. The question, why me, that echoes for decades. In Chelyabinsk, school number 107 builds a monument to its lost students, every name engraved, children's faces staring from photographs, and beneath them, an inscription. They were on their way to happiness, but found eternity. Investigators follow every lead. Could someone have planted explosives in the carriages, blown up the track? For months, the theory of terrorism is examined, but no evidence is ever found. Slowly, the truth emerges. The explosion didn't happen on the trains, but beneath them. The source was the pipeline. This was not an attack, but a man-made disaster. That knowledge doesn't soften the blow. Hundreds died because of negligence. The investigation searches for those responsible. Who oversaw the welding? Who monitored the pipeline's pressure? Who approved the route in the first place? In the end, 2 men are blamed: Alexander Kurbatov, head of the pipeline section, and his deputy, Viktor Kurochkin. The weight of the catastrophe is placed on their shoulders. When the verdict is finally read, families of the victims cannot believe what they hear. Kurbatov and Kurochkin are sentenced to just 2 years in a penal colony, 2 years for 780 lives. In 1997, the appeals court reviews the case. Families travel once again, hoping justice will finally be served. But the ruling is upheld. 2 years in a penal colony, and nothing more. And life moves on. The railway must be rebuilt. The Trans-Siberian is an artery the country cannot live without. The trains must keep running, no matter the tragedy. Reconstruction begins just days after the disaster. Crews work around the clock, clearing wreckage, replacing twisted rails, restoring the power lines. The state issues compensation to families. By the standards of the time, the sums seem significant. A few thousand rubles for each life lost. Large families are given apartments, benefits, vouchers for sanatoriums. In 1992, at the 1,010th kilometer of the Trans-Siberian Railway, a memorial was unveiled. Black granite slabs engraved with the names of the dead, each letter filled with gold. Beside them stands a small chapel. To this day, people come here with flowers. Every year, on June 4th, relatives, friends, and strangers who simply care gather to read the names, light candles, and remember. And yet, as years and decades pass, the same questions remain unanswered. The most obvious one is simple. How was this even allowed to happen? Why was a high-pressure gas pipeline laid just a few dozen meters from the country's main railway artery? And another painful question. 2,000 tons of gas don't leak out in a second. It's a process that takes hours, maybe even days. Where were the sensors? Where was the pressure control system? Gas workers later offered an explanation. That section of the pipeline ran through swampy ground. Sensors often failed because of the damp. False alarms were constant. Dispatchers grew used to ignoring the warnings. The memory of what happened at the 1,010th kilometer isn't just a tribute to the dead. It's a warning to the living. A reminder that negligence always comes with a price. And sooner or later, it ends in tragedy. If this story made you stop and think, give this video a like. Share it with your friends. Let more people know what happened that terrible night in Bashkiria. And in the comments, tell us, had you heard of this tragedy before? In your view, what must be done to make sure nothing like this ever happens again? Subscribe to the channel. This is only the beginning. Ahead are more stories of disasters that change the world. Tragedies that should teach us to value human life above all. And remember, every catastrophe begins with someone's negligence. Every tragedy could have been prevented if someone had spoken up in time. Don't stay indifferent to what happens around you. Sometimes your voice can be the one that prevents the next disaster.